What's going on? 5515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am?
It is one of the greatest unsolved crimes in history.
We have a kidnapping. There's a ransom note here.
A little girl vanishes from home Christmas night.
It's just like you got hit in the stomach. Where's my child?
Hours later, she's found strangled to death.
Now with our GMA cover story, new developments in the JonBenet Ramsey case. Sources tell ABC News progress is being made in the investigation into the 6-year-old's unsolved murder nearly 30 years ago.
She was the little girl with a dazzling smile whose name became etched into a nation's nightmares. JonBenet Ramsey, only 6, was found lifeless under the strangest circumstances, igniting a mystery that refused to fade. For nearly 30 years, her story has echoed through documentaries, tabloids, and dinner table debates. But now, her brother Burke finally steps forward, and what he reveals threatens to upend everything we thought we knew about that tragic night.
JonBenet Ramsey.
There is renewed attention in the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, perhaps the most famous unsolved mystery in modern American history.
Stay with us because what you're about to hear will leave you speechless. The hidden truth behind JonBenet's haunting mystery. It began as a holiday like any other, until a handwritten ransom note turned the Ramsey home into a crime scene. Demanding an oddly specific sum of $118,000, the note was long, unsettlingly detailed, and eerily written with paper and pen found inside the house. The number wasn't random. It mirrored a recent work bonus John Ramsey had just received. For detectives, that wasn't a coincidence. But even more alarming, there were no signs of a break-in, not a single broken window, not a single forced door. When JonBenet Ramsey was found dead in the basement, the world was horrified. The 6-year-old beauty queen, once all sparkle and stage lights, was now the tragic center of a story riddled with unanswered questions. The young girl had been strangled. Her skull had been fractured. There were troubling injuries, clues of something more sinister. It was the kind of horror that shattered not just a family, but a nation's sense of safety. But as shocking as the crime was, the investigation took an even darker turn. The focus shifted from outsiders to the people inside the house. Suspicion settled heavily on the family and, strangely, on the one person least expected, JonBenet's older brother, Burke. He was just 9 years old then, quiet, reserved, hidden in the background as headlines exploded. Yet, the media painted him with shadowy suspicion. Why hadn't he come out of his room? Why did he say he slept through everything? Why was he smiling during an interview years later? His name became a quiet obsession in living rooms and on tabloid covers. While detectives hunted for evidence, the public began building theories of their own. Years passed. Burke vanished from the public eye. Then, nearly 3 decades later, he returned with a voice the world had waited years to hear. In an interview with Dr. Phil, Burke, now an adult working in tech, finally broke his silence.
You know the theories that they set forth in saying that your mom killed JonBenet?
I don't know the details, but I know the ransom note, they think the handwriting matched.
Have you seen it? Have you read it?
Nervous and visibly emotional, he shared fragments of memories burned into his childhood. He remembered standing at JonBenet's funeral, confused by how one of her eyes didn't look right. He didn't fully grasp death until his father, overwhelmed with tears, told him JonBenet was now in heaven. But the questions didn't stop. Did Burke accidentally harm his sister in a childlike moment of anger? Did his parents try to cover it up? When asked bluntly if he had struck her, Burke's response was firm. No. No hesitation. No wavering. Just a firm denial. He explained that he had stayed in bed that night, frightened and unsure. He trusted his parents to handle whatever was happening downstairs. In his mind, maybe it was a burglar or someone dangerous. But he didn't know. What some viewers saw as a smile during the interview, experts later called a nervous reaction, not joy. But in a case this complex, even a flicker of discomfort became a new clue for the world to overanalyze. Inside the Ramsey home, investigators found a flashlight capable of inflicting fatal injury, a paintbrush from Patsy's art supplies repurposed as a strangulation tool, and unusual marks on JonBenet's body, possibly from a stun gun. Still, nothing definitively pointed to anyone. The theories kept swirling, but the facts stayed frustratingly out of reach. John and Patsy Ramsey, in the middle of it all, tried to shield Burke from the chaos. But the media storm found them even in mundane moments. Once, in a grocery store, young Burke spotted a headline accusing him of the murder. He broke down in tears right there in the aisle. How does a family live under that kind of scrutiny? How do you raise a child the world has already condemned? Decades later, even with all the interviews, documentaries, leaked reports, and legal debates, the case remains unsolved. The Boulder Police Department recently reminded the public that JonBenet's case is still open. No one has been charged. And yet, everyone has an opinion. Burke Ramsey's long silence was never about guilt. It may have been about survival. But now, as he finally opens up and his father adds emotional weight to their side of the story, the case that once seemed frozen in time feels like it's moving again. But what was it about JonBenet's story that captured global headlines? Who was she really? Let's take a closer look at the life of this innocent young girl. The glittering life of JonBenet Ramsey. To understand the weight of that tragedy, we first have to step into the dazzling world JonBenet lived in before everything fell apart. Born on August 6, 1990, in Atlanta, Georgia, JonBenet Patricia Ramsey was more than just a child with a pretty smile. Her very name blended both her parents, JonBenet and Patricia, Patsy Ramsey, as if destiny had already marked her as special. Her father, John, wasn't just successful. He was a millionaire executive whose company, Access Graphics, soared after merging with Lockheed Martin. Her mother, Patsy, once wore the crown of Miss West Virginia, a woman who had known the stage, the spotlight, and the thrill of applause long before her daughter ever took one step in a pageant dress. By 1991, the Ramsey family had traded the bustle of Atlanta for the upscale calm of Boulder, Colorado. Their new home wasn't just a house, it was a grand 15-room estate tucked into one of the city's most affluent neighborhoods.
To give you some perspective, JonBenet's bedroom is behind and above me. On the other end of the house is her brother Burke's bedroom. Above Burke's bedroom is where her parents' bed was.
It came with the kind of space and luxury that symbolized everything they had worked for. But behind those ornate doors, their most precious treasure was JonBenet. From the time she could walk, JonBenet turned heads. She was bubbly, confident, and knew how to light up a room. It wasn't long before Patsy began entering her into pageants, competitions where JonBenet didn't just participate, she sparkled. Dressed in rhinestones and ribbons with her blonde curls perfectly styled, she quickly claimed titles like Little Miss Colorado and America's Royale Miss. Cameras loved her, audiences adored her. But beyond the gowns and glitter, she was still a 6-year-old, playful, smart, and full of life. She attended High Peaks Elementary in Boulder, where teachers remembered her as a sweet and vibrant student. At home, she was surrounded by love, especially from her parents and her older brother Burke, who lived with her. Though John had 3 older children from a previous marriage, Elizabeth, Melinda, and John Andrew, only Burke shared the Boulder home with JonBenet. Tragedy had already touched the family when Elizabeth died in a car accident in 1992, just 2 years after JonBenet Ramsey was born. Despite the heartbreak, the Ramseys worked hard to keep their family close-knit. They also spent time at their vacation home in northern Michigan, giving JonBenet a childhood filled with both privilege and affection. But fame has a way of attracting more than admiration. The very stage that made her a star may have also drawn the wrong kind of attention. In a world that often confuses beauty with vulnerability, JonBenet's innocent rise to fame painted a target too big to ignore. And though the holidays of 1996 brought festive cheer to their home, no one could have imagined the darkness about to descend. But what if the real reason JonBenet's case remains unsolved is because investigators focused on the wrong suspects from the very beginning? Stay tuned. A father's fight and the justice that still waits. Nearly 3 decades have passed since that fateful December morning in 1996. But for John, the weight of that day never lifted. The grief remains sharp. The frustration still simmers. What eats at him most is the belief that the people responsible for finding answers, those sworn to protect and investigate, locked on to the wrong suspects from the very beginning. Instead of following the evidence wherever it might lead, he says, they focused inward, blaming the very family that was shattered by the crime. John recalls how swiftly the investigation turned into an inquisition. His wife Patsy, his son Burke, and even he were picked apart in the media and in police reports. Theories were drawn up with barely any evidence. He insists the detectives developed tunnel vision, choosing to build a narrative rather than unravel one. That rush to judgment, he argues, may have destroyed the only real chance to find JonBenet's killer. Even now, what angers him most is that many of the people who botched the original investigation still hold influence over the case. Despite the advances in DNA analysis, forensic science, and criminal profiling, the case hasn't been re-evaluated with modern tools or fresh investigators. Why, he asks, has no independent team been allowed full access? Why haven't the authorities invited outside experts to look at the evidence with new eyes? His questions don't come from bitterness. They come from heartbreak. John speaks of Patsy with a kind of quiet reverence. She passed away in 2006, her life cut short by cancer, still burdened by the cloud of suspicion. She went to her grave without knowing who ended their daughter's life, and worse, without ever being cleared in the public's eye. John mourns her as a wife, but more deeply as a mother who never stopped being judged. He says the false accusations drained her, emotionally, mentally, and physically. Grief alone didn't kill her. The endless public scrutiny helped erode what was left of her strength. But John refuses to stop fighting. He believes the science that wasn't available in the 90s might now hold the answers they need. He clings to the hope that one day, someone with conscience or knowledge will come forward, or that someone with authority will finally care enough to break the cycle of silence and take the case in a new direction. Not to point fingers, not to make headlines, but to give JonBenet the justice she deserves. Today, JonBenet would be approaching her 35th birthday. Instead, her name lives on in documentaries, podcasts, and late-night debates. Her photo remains a haunting reminder, a childhood paused, a life stolen. Maybe people have stayed invested because of the wealth and fame. Maybe it's the mystery. Or maybe, at the heart of it, we all just want to believe that even after all this time, the truth can still be found. Now, it's also a story of resilience. A family refusing to let her memory fade, and a fight for justice that still burns. But how did the world react? And how did those reactions shape the course of the case? Let's take a closer look at how public opinion didn't just respond to JonBenet's death. It helped rewrite the narrative. When Ramsey's family grief turned into a media war. As the Ramsey family continued to seek justice, the world around them began to focus less on what had been lost and more on who to blame. It wasn't long after JonBenet's death in December 1996 that the national mood shifted.
It was the day after Christmas in 1996 when JonBenet's parents discovered their daughter was missing from their Boulder, Colorado home. Hours later, the father, John Ramsey, finding the young girl dead in the basement.
What began as a heartbreaking tragedy quickly spiraled into something else entirely. The media, hungry for answers and captivated by the case's strange details, latched onto a single, unforgettable image. JonBenet in full pageant attire, glittering tiara perched on her head, face painted with bright lipstick and heavy makeup. That picture lit a match. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a murdered child. It became a spectacle, an obsession. Newspapers and television hosts didn't ask only who killed JonBenet. They asked what kind of parents dressed their daughter like that. Was she pushed into pageantry to fulfill her mother's own dreams? Was there a hidden darkness beneath the polished surface of the Ramsey household? These questions took on lives of their own, fueled by talk shows, tabloids, and endless speculation. Everyone had an opinion. Every move John and Patsy made was scrutinized. Their grief was analyzed, as if it were a performance. Smiles were twisted into suspicion. Silence became evidence. Even their clothing choices made headlines. The public's fascination piled pressure onto law enforcement. Rather than fanning out their investigation, authorities started turning inward. The Boulder Police Department focused on inconsistencies in the family's statements, convinced that the answers lay within the house. Doors that should have opened to broader possibilities were instead shut tight. And in this narrowing of perspective, crucial time and leads slipped away. But one voice inside the investigation refused to follow the crowd. Veteran homicide detective Lou Smith, known for solving over 200 cases, joined the team as an independent expert. Almost immediately, he sensed the prevailing theory didn't match the physical evidence. He believed JonBenet's murder was the result of a botched kidnapping attempt, that someone had entered the house from outside and things had gone horribly wrong. He pointed to unusual signs, a broken window, strange marks on JonBenet's body, and elements in the ransom note that didn't align with an insider's knowledge. Yet Smith's perspective clashed hard with the department's narrative. His ideas were dismissed, and after hitting repeated resistance, he stepped away from the case. But not before leaving behind a detailed account supporting his intruder theory, one that for years would go largely ignored. As time passed, the Ramsey family lived under a cloud of suspicion. Friends distanced themselves. Headlines never stopped. Patsy, especially, became the center of ruthless public judgment. But in 2006, a revelation finally came, though far too late. That year, Patsy lost her battle with ovarian cancer. She died still burdened by public doubt, never having seen the case resolved or her name fully cleared. Soon after her passing, forensic technology uncovered something remarkable. A DNA profile found on JonBenet's clothing, unidentified and crucially not matching anyone in the Ramsey family. This single discovery dramatically shifted the course of the case. The district attorney issued a public apology, acknowledging that John and Patsy had been wrongly accused and unfairly treated. They were officially exonerated. But for John Ramsey, that apology couldn't repair the damage. Years of being vilified had already done their work. His wife was gone. His daughter's killer still walked free. And no headline could undo the harm caused by speculation paraded as fact. What was left was a trail of emotional scars, media-fueled judgment, and investigative missteps that continue to haunt one of America's most chilling cold cases. Then, more than 2 decades after that horrific night, something unexpected reignited hope. A new science that can solve old pains. But just when it seemed the door to answers might stay closed forever, a breakthrough in a completely different case sent a ripple of hope through those still holding on to JonBenet's memory. It was a single discovery in 2018 that reignited John Ramsey's fight with more fire than ever before. One that didn't come from a detective or a tip, but from DNA and distant relatives. That year, investigators finally cracked the decades-old mystery of the Golden State Killer using a new forensic method, genetic genealogy.
Before the Golden State Killer and Brian Kohberger cases, a lot of people had never heard of investigative genetic genealogy. But if you've ever traced your ancestry or built a family tree using only a cheek swab and a website, you know exactly what IGG is all about.
By uploading DNA data into public databases like GED Match and Family Tree DNA, researchers tracked a killer through family trees, connecting the unknown suspect to distant cousins. The arrest of Joseph James DeAngelo stunned the world and gave cold case families a sliver of hope, including John Ramsey. For over 2 decades, John had lived under the weight of his daughter JonBenet's unsolved murder. Watching this revolutionary science unmask a predator from the 1970s made him pause. What if the same method could finally solve his daughter's case? Could that same approach, rooted in DNA and determination, uncover the truth that had eluded them for so long? Motivated, John threw himself into this new world. He visited genetic laboratories, spoke to pioneers in forensic science like C.C. Moore and Dr. Ellen Graytock, and immersed himself in the possibilities. These weren't old-school tools. They were light years ahead, mapping genetic code across millions of data points to rebuild family lines and identify even the most distant biological connections. To John, this wasn't just promising. It was their best shot, maybe their last. But as hope bloomed, the path forward slammed into a wall, the Boulder Police Department. Despite overwhelming public support and thousands of signatures urging them to hand over the remaining DNA for advanced testing, authorities refused. The evidence remained locked away, untouched. John's pleas fell on deaf ears. The same police force that had once focused more on blaming his family than seeking the truth now wouldn't allow technology to speak. To John, it was more than frustrating. It felt like history repeating itself. Still, the spirit of investigation continued beyond the badge. Cindy Mara, daughter of retired detective Lou Smith, picked up where her late father left off. Lou had long believed the killer came from outside the home. Before his death in 2010, Lou compiled evidence, collected suspects' names, and built a case that contradicted the official story. Cindy inherited more than files. She inherited his mission. Determined, she began tracking down DNA samples from everyone on her father's list. But just like John, her efforts were stalled without full access to the key genetic material stored by police. Still, she presses on, convinced, as Lou was, that the real answer lies in that strand of truth. Now remarried, but still haunted, John Ramsey refuses to let go. Even as the years wear him down, he clings to hope. Hope that someone in power will change their mind. Hope that science will do what suspicion couldn't. Hope that one day justice will come. And when asked what he would say to JonBenet today, his voice softens. He would tell her he's sorry, not because he did something wrong, but because he still hasn't been able to do what mattered most. Protect her. Catch the person who took her away. Give her the peace she deserves. And though the world saw JonBenet as a child in makeup and sparkles, John sees her as she really was. A daughter, a light, a soul too beautiful to be forgotten. Now, decades later, that fight continues in the shadows, but it isn't without resistance. Let's explore where the case stands now and what's keeping the truth from coming to light. Where things stand now. Since losing JonBenet in 1996, John's life has been a painful mix of mourning and relentless public scrutiny. He didn't just bury his daughter, he also lost his wife, Patsy, to cancer in 2006. And even when he tried to move forward by remarrying, the media followed him. His new wife, Jan, was stunned when their wedding photo appeared on the cover of a tabloid. The headlines never stopped, the accusations never fully faded. Yet through it all, John never gave up on one thing: finding the truth. He's been vocal about what he calls the Boulder Police Department's failure to investigate properly. From day one, they looked inward, at him, at Patsy, at Burke, and didn't explore other possibilities. But not everyone in law enforcement agreed. One man in particular stood apart: veteran detective Lou Smith. With over 200 solved homicide cases behind him, Lou believed the Ramseys were innocent. His theory? Someone broke in that night. Maybe it was a botched kidnapping. But whatever happened, he was convinced it wasn't the family. Lou combed through the evidence carefully and concluded that the signs pointed to an intruder. But instead of embracing his findings, local detectives pushed back. Lou eventually quit in frustration, but continued his work privately, gathering tips and tracking names that never made it onto official police lists. Before he died in 2010, Lou passed everything he knew to his daughter, Cindy Mara. Now, Cindy is carrying the torch. She's quietly collecting DNA from every person her father once considered a suspect. Her goal is simple: match one of them to the unidentified male DNA found on JonBenet's clothing. But there's one problem: they still don't have access to the full DNA profile. The Boulder police have refused to release it for reanalysis using modern tools like genetic genealogy. John has formally requested the Colorado governor to grant permission, but no answer has come. Without it, Cindy's work and the chance for closure remains stuck. Still, John clings to hope. He believes DNA science is improving rapidly and could unlock the truth if only allowed. But time isn't on his side. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he admitted he's not sure he'll ever see the case solved. What breaks him most is the feeling that he failed to protect his daughter. That's the pain he carries every day. When asked what he'd say to JonBenet now, John's voice trembled. He said he's sorry, not because he did something wrong, but because he couldn't stop what happened. Still, he wants her to know she was deeply loved. That love, more than anything else, keeps him going. And so, the search continues, quietly, stubbornly, through science, through faith, and through a father's unshakable devotion to the little girl the world never forgot. But what do you think truly lies behind JonBenet's mysterious death and the investigation that raised more questions than answers? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.